Hey, Frank, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah. So I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, the Rust Belt, as everybody calls it. Went in the Air Force, as you could probably see some of the things behind me, but I was in the Air Force 6 years. Got out in 1983 and worked for a company you probably heard of, MCI. Yep. And from there, I was 15 years and moved into some operations to sales. So that's where I started my sales career, actually. And I moved to North Carolina and ultimately Chicago. And now I'm in Tennessee. But I've been with a few companies since then. My career has been, very good career. I've been very thankful for where I've worked. Right now, I'm with a company called Swimlane. We're in the cybersecurity space, and I oversee the Southeast for them as far as an individual contributor.
And why sales?
You know, it's funny you say that because I'll never forget. I was in operations, and I remember this Jerry Hogan. I have to remember the name. He was over our operations team, and I had my tie on. You know, that days we all wore ties. And he looked at me. He said, "Frank, you should go in sales one day." I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And ultimately, one of my friends was a sales rep, and I'd support him. He said, "Frank, I'm moving to product." He says, "You should take my role." I said, "Bob, I don't sell." He says, "You do it all the time. You just don't realize it." That's what started it. And I'm very thankful. That was probably in 1990.
And what do you think they meant by that?
I think it's really the idea of not just going out and pitching. I really go in and understand where people are going and how to align where they're going to what we can solve in those areas. I've never really sold a product, in my opinion, and it's really what I think, I've always done.
And was that something that you learned or modeled after somebody, or was it just a natural?
It's always been part of me. I don't know how I could describe it because, as a kid, I can say I never really did that at that time. But it's just something I think internalizing to know people. I think that's the first and foremost thing is sales. I don't care what you're selling. It's all about the people. And I think I've always been a people person. I think if you're a salesperson, you better be a people person.
You better be. Yeah.
But I think it's all about connecting with people first and not talking about what I do.
And that's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? A little?
Yeah, it can be when you're actually pushed to get a quota, pushed to make all the things happen for
get meetings, right? Progressive deal. Yeah.
At the end, though, I've never changed who I am. I don't think you do that. And I think results prove themselves. I've taken over in the Southeast. I sold to the Midwest. What I did there, I'm doing here. I'm the same person I was there and doing the same things to go out and reach out to customers, people, connect with people. That's still the same. I don't care where you live.
And how long did it take before you were comfortable in sales? Was it natural or because there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of pressure?
Yeah, I can tell you, I can remember my first rejection and I was working on, I won't name the account, but it was in Florida, very large grocery chain. I'd worked on that for 2 years and they were with the incumbent and I did everything I could on that one. And I really thought it was going our way, but I'll never forget the customer called me. She goes, "This is a tough decision." She goes, "We've been with them for 7 years and they said that they could do this. We're going to give them another year. And if not, we'll be back." And that was my first oh my gosh, I lost this. But you know what? The day after, I even told her, I said, "I will continue to follow up with you." And I did. And the year after, they came our way. But it was the first initial, "We're not going with you." I'd never had that before. So, but you just keep pressing on, I guess. That's what I learned from that experience.
And how did you internalize it?
Well, first I went and talked to my boss. I said, "Guess what? They're not coming our way."
Yeah.
And I had to internalize it with him to understand, what I had done wrong. And there was nothing I had done wrong. So I think when you understand those things, what could I have done different? Really, in that situation, nothing. We all learn from mistakes. I always like to do a post-mortem call, win or lose, because I don't want to repeat the same mistake again to lose. I'd like to repeat the same to win. And in that one there, it was just about the relationship that they had with that other incumbent for several years. I want to be on that side of the coin when those decisions come around too, though.
Well, I think that post-mortem is critical because people say you either win or learn, but I tend to push back on that unless you really write down the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn?
Life is a lesson. And I always say wins are wins when you look at them. Like an example would be, hey, I got a first appointment. That's a win. Hey, we got a meeting with whoever. That's a win. We got an executive briefing. That's a win. The win everyone can categorize as when you win the deal. Yes, that is the win, but wins are taking them in stages. And I think that sometimes people forget what it takes to get there.
That's it. Because a lot of reps and a lot of managers they want them to grind and grind and grind. Mm-hmm. But if there's not little wins every day, there's no dopamine. There's just cortisol, right? There's just stress.
You said it. It's stress. And then you feel like, what am I doing wrong? Look, you just got an appointment today. What have you done wrong? Nothing. Again, you have to internalize what that means to each individual. I'm an impatient person to myself when I say that, because I like to do things. And, I've been in this role for a month, but I'm already doing things to, like I said earlier, to build my market the way I need to, but I know what I need to do and I want to get there. At the same time, I have to be realistic of what it takes to do all those things. And as I see them, like yesterday, I had a great day. Today, I'm going to have another great day. I know sometimes we forget to see those things to the ultimate goal. And I know my goal is to build this region up to where I know it can go. But I also know it's going to take stages to get there. It doesn't happen in a quarter. It doesn't happen in 2 quarters. It takes time. And you get the wins in between though, too.
Yeah, because everyone's always looking for like the magic subject line or closing that'll get the deal instead of understanding the game you're playing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, in this world today, or this era today, because I remember when I sold back when and what it is today, it's much different than what I did then. I've had to refine some of the things I did then to what I do now. Same principle of who I am, but idea you have to change yourself to know what the market is going, things that people were saying, things that people were doing. And I think that's some of the challenges that some sales reps do. They don't really want to change the recipe, and you have to.
Well, the recipe's kind of going with what they feel, reacting to the scenario instead of setting the scenario.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Guiding the client along the way.
Yeah, because you have to understand where they're going, meaning, and then guide them where you can take them, and then some. Sometimes we want to get it right in a way where we can start saying, I can do that. Well, great. What does that mean? Nothing. You have to understand it and I think that's one of the principles I learned is understanding the person I'm speaking with. What have they said? And I deal with CISOs, I deal with CIOs, everybody does, it's executives, and everybody ultimate goal is to get to them. Well, so does everybody else.
Yeah, you're not the only
Good idea, right? Yeah. Good idea. But what is that CISO saying? And I like to do things like search out, they've spoken on a panel, they've done a podcast, well, how about that? But they've done things where they've sat and talked about what they're trying to do to align what they're doing to the business, and then aligning. Well, I also listen to, I'll go to the investor site, listen to the business when they do the press release with their earnings to the street, because the CEO, CFO are aligning their objectives as well as the CISOs aligning their objectives. How do I align to those things? That takes a lot of time and prep, but that's what differentiates everybody when you look at it. And I think, and don't get me wrong, there are people that will do that, but that's what you have to do to align today than you did yesterday when I say that.
Yeah. And what were some of the epiphanies that you discovered along the way? Because going from like an MCI type sale to what you're doing now, very different.
But very different. Then it was, you sold a product, it did good things, it solved problems, but there was a cost, and everybody looked at the cost and all the things, how you could do. My goodness, can you imagine what you did then today with cost? Oh, geez, oh man. But at the same time, I had to learn, now I'm having to align business more so than I did then. I did then, but it was not as much, because really it was like, okay, I can get it for this over here. I can get it for this over here. Okay, these are the features and everything. I like this. I'll go with you guys. A little bit more than that, but that's the gist of it. Today, there is so much shift and transformation. There is so much shift in products, and there's a ton of them when you look at it. And there's a shift, and everybody's got the message. So you got to understand that message better than you ever did before, because the customer is doing their own research before they even talk to you, before you even open your mouth. So you better know what they're saying before you even go in there and start talking about things.
And is this, your first time in security, or has security been something you've been focused on?
No, I did it before when I was at a company before this one, and a different solutions there in security. When I say that, this is more different in what I'm doing now, but still in security. The messaging is a little bit different, but at the same time, it's the same it's the same process. You know, you have to understand the things that align to the people. So I think that's the biggest thing I probably take out of what I do is understand. I do a lot of research, I got to tell you, but I'm only working Fortune 1000.
Okay.
So when I look at a BDR, they're pounding the phones. They can't do the stuff I do. I mean, my gosh, they would never make their number, right? But there's some things they could do differently, maybe to align to that, right? But I think someone in my role has to do this type of research in understanding all the. And I find so much good information, though. Every day I find another nugget, and it's good information when I say that, and I'll share it with people because I think that's important too. I just think that we need more preparation in advance.
And when you say preparation, it's preparation about them, not about what you do.
Exactly. Yeah. My preparation to what they do will align to them understanding what I can do to solve them for their problem, when I say.
And are you taking, sounds like a top-down approach?
Top-down meaning executive?
Executive. I'm not sure who uses the product. And security is so broad.
Oh, it is. You said it. So I won't go into all the different layers because you're right. It is. But at the end of the day, it really gets into top down. I'll start with the CISO because the CISO brings it down to his people. Yep. I'll look at those people, things that they're saying, LinkedIn activity. What are they posting? What are they saying? Things like that. What kind of jobs are they posting? What are those jobs doing? You know, did that person speak on a panel? What did they say? Do they have a white paper? What did it read? All those things that you're pulling out data to understand, okay, I know where they're going now, where I can go to them and say something that I think I can solve a problem that they're outlining. Without that, you're just going in there blind to think, hey, I can do automation. Great.
We got that.
We got that. So does everybody else. What do you mean by that, right?
Yeah. Or digital transformation or some other, buzz sentence, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you got to know what that means before you even make I hate to say the word pitch because I don't like pitch, but you have, before you make your you give your message to the customer, because you have first impressions are the key. And I always tell people, Fortune 1000, say I have 140 different companies I'm going to go try to engage with. If I blow one, I'm down to 139. So I got to take my best foot forward every day and knowing what I'm going to say before I go out and say it. So it doesn't mean I'm going to make a mistake or not make a mistake, rather. We all do, but I'll understand better the next time before I go to number 138. Example.
Well, that's it, because that's almost 1% of your market.
Exactly. And you can't do that too many times, can you?
No, about 138. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it take before you took this approach versus the numbers game? Take your value prop or your insight and pitch it.
Probably about 2006. I could tell you that. Because what it was, I was in software sales, and I started in the software sales for the first time. Then it was like, okay, how many phone calls and how many of this and all that. And I started looking at that. And first of all, my personality is not that. I mean, I'll do it, but at the same time. So I started investigating what groups, what associations, what is out there in my area. And I start engaging with people. One of the people actually put me in touch with you, actually, was Camp IT in Chicago, Dan Horowitz. Dan's company's been there for, oh my gosh, 30-something years probably. But anyway, with that said, I call, hey, can I have lunch with you? I'm trying to understand this market. It was understanding him, not understanding, the people that he's connected with. I really wanted to understand, what do you do? And what I found was there are other associations, as Dan did, and other groups that I got connected with, and I start learning what people were saying. And that helped me to translate my message better. And I started connecting with people, networking, and not just networking just to network, but building a relationship with people. Chicago was really good for those events, Executives Club.
Highly dense.
I mean, I can go down the list, but they still have them in Tennessee where I'm at too. That still follows there, is that here is my point. And that's where I try to break the ground and understand the people, who's in the market, what are they saying, who am I connected with, and know those people. And then I can start extrapolating data, doing the things I do. The process.
And that was because it was smarter, more effective, and it fit your style.
It does. Exactly. It fits my style. Everybody's different. My way of doing things is not going to follow somebody else who wants to maybe work with, I don't know, external partners or whatever. And that's great. I think I like to build the relationship on both sides, but at the same time, I do a little bit more due diligence up front. That takes a lot of time. My nighttime activity is really doing what I'm talking about, not my daytime. I mean, I try to do that during the day as much, but I'm at daytime. I'm trying to do the other things I should be doing with it. So yeah, it's an ongoing, weekly thing that I'm doing. Preparing now, one of the accounts I'm looking at now, I'm going into more data. It'll probably be a week before I actually engage with them, is my point, because I'll have all the information where I know where I'm going before I even go there.
And a lot of people would look at this as personalization, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's much more of you being viewed as part of their tribe, part of the security ecosystem, instead of a sales guy trying to pitch his software.
A trusted advisor, we've heard that a lot. And when they can understand that you're in there for their best interests, you're that trusted advisor. You're not just trying to sell them whatever. I've actually gone in companies where I say, that's not really a good role for us to do there. Yeah. And you'd be upfront with them, because you just try to sell things, you're out. One bad mistake, you're done. My reputation is everything. I mean, that's one thing I always say. The reputation you have carries you forward. Integrity, when I say that, all those things that we know.
And certainly in security, where it's so broad and deep. And until there's a problem, they think they're comfortable. They think they got it covered.
Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge that you have to outline with them, with what they really think they know, in a way, really not to put them like at their heels, like you're saying, pushing them. But it's how you say things. And I think you're right, though. You do have to let them understand other things that could be compromised by not doing a different way, and what that could mean. I mean, we see things in the paper every day about just those things. So, but you have to understand how to say that, be a little bit empathetic in what you're trying to do, but at the same time, challenge people what you're trying to explain to them.
And have you had any pushback from upper management, because they're looking at KPIs and activity and pipeline? And
I could say I'm very thankful that I mean, I think if you have results that prove where you've been, it's obviously followed you, they're going to give you the chance to do what you do. Now, at some point, they're going to say, hey, but I've never seen that. I could say when you mentioned the company before, you're on a monthly quota. My goodness, you better be hitting those numbers, right? It's a much different role. You don't get a couple months of that, and I don't care what you're doing, right? And nowadays, when you're doing the large accounts and you're trying to focus in on getting into large enterprises, you have to understand that takes time to do the things we're talking about, but not a year. I mean, you have other accounts you can foster through to get you beachheads, as I call, to get in there, grow and expand. And then ultimately you get the whales, we know. But those, you could cycle in, and nobody's going to beat you down if you're doing all the right things.
And what keeps you motivated between these gaps of all the work and getting an order?
I think it's back to the little wins that we talked about. I think it's really that. If you don't see any results coming out of it, then you're starting to really look at yourself and doubt. But I don't really see doubt. It may be that I didn't get, oh gosh, he didn't want to take my phone call, or he didn't want to have that meeting or whatever. It doesn't mean that I did anything. It might be just the timing, right? And so you continue on and follow up. That timing might have now opened up. Maybe it's just cycle for budget, cycle for timing on their side. Who knows, right? And that's the other thing. People really think, well, he didn't return my call, or he didn't return my email, or whatever. Do you ever think that maybe he got up in the morning, maybe his wife and him had an argument, something personal in their life? Boss just said, hey, we got to cut 10%, or whatever it may be. Doesn't mean that they didn't respond to you because they didn't care, or maybe they did. Maybe something you said just didn't make sense. But sometimes we want that instantaneous gratification, and that's just not right.
Well, we assume since it's our top priority, it's at least an important priority for them.
Yeah, our priority is their priority. Totally agree with you, Ron.
They don't look at it that way, no.
Oh yeah, exactly right.
And what do you think differentiates you from most reps?
I think it's the preparation part that I mentioned earlier. I absolutely think that's, when I tell people what I do, some of the things, like I'll listen to a YouTube where somebody's given an interview. And again, it may be a 10-minute interview, it might be a 30-minute interview, but I go through and I take down information. What are they saying? Listen to the investor side. Some people look at me, man, that's a lot of time and everything. I go, yeah, but it proves out to be a lot of value, which you're going to be able to understand before you even talk to people. I think not everybody does that. I'm not saying people don't, so take that the right way, but I don't think people do as much of that as they probably should. The events, the things that I talk about to go to, I think those are things that I just do. I believe in them. COVID actually impacted that without a doubt, starting to open up and do things. Virtualization has actually, they're not the same. You know, you and I are doing a Zoom, but these virtual events, they still have some value to them. But I'm actually going to attend one like here in the next 2 weeks. And it's important that you meet people, engage with them for however many hours it is versus a 30-minute Zoom call, and get and understand them better.
Well, that's it. Anyone who's never sold face-to-face doesn't understand that, you know, meeting somebody for coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it is, that's where the real understanding happens.
It really does. And, you know, I remember one time I was at a CIO panel, and this was in Illinois, and it was 4 CIOs. I always, you know, you listen, and he had a sales rep there. I'll never forget the sales rep. Asked well, how do I get a meeting with you? Not kidding now when I say this. And he goes, well, if you have something that makes sense, he says, I'll get back in touch with you. It was the follow-up question. I was like, you really said that? How do I know you're going to do that? Oh my gosh. Well, he went back on his heels and he said, let me ask you something, and everyone, how many of you give back to the community? How many of you are out there helping the organizations? And he named one. And, you know, that really caught me. And this is back in probably 2007 or whatever, but it's still the thing I believe today. When we sometimes look at the person in the organization, we sometimes think the role is CIO or VP, whatever it may be. We have to understand them as people. What do they believe in? What are the things that they believe as far as the local community? And I believe in local community when I say that, not just because of getting in front of people. But when he said to that, I went up to him afterwards, and he was the CIO of the year in 2004. And I had done my research on that. I said, but I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of this organization. I started explaining things. He says, I'll tell you what, let's have coffee. And we did. And we started explaining it. He put me in touch with that organization. We had coffee, and I've been part of that for 16 years. For the same reason, it gives back to the community is the reason. But it's those things that are important to the people you're talking to. And sometimes we don't understand those parts. We only understand the business part, and there's another side of this.
Also, that's how probably most sales reps think. How could I get a meeting with you so you can listen to what I can do for you?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if they were interested, they'd call you, right? It's up to our job to get them interested and bring something to them that they want.
Yeah.
And start where they are. He's not interested.
He's not interested. Exactly. And I also think that if you start connecting with people, understand the business, understanding what's involved in the community, what they're possibly
they care about.
I think it all comes full circle. Yeah. And it doesn't mean they're going to buy from you. I think that's the other thing. I think sometimes, okay, I'm doing all these great things. How come they're not buying? They're not ready. You know, there could be a lot of reasons why. Maybe, hey, they bought a big contract with somebody, and there's a lot of political reasons why they did that. There's a lot of things. You can't accept that everything you do is always going to work, but doesn't mean you don't do the things to get you there, though, too.
And how do you qualify somebody? Because you get 140 accounts. They're not all equal. How do you prioritize them? Because you're making a huge personal investment in learning about them.
I think what I have to do is, if you back 140 of them, I go in and understand each of them, what I can find out as far as, are they using a competitor? What kind of competitor? You know, the things that they're doing now as a company, what things that they're trying to solve, what things, you know, what are there people in that organization? They are totally with one side, you know, the other competitor. And that's probably going to be one of the lower priorities as opposed to another. You got to get all the groundwork done to understand that. And by the way, it's not perfect science. You go in there still to try to uncover. And you might find out through the job postings I mentioned, you might say, hey, they're using so-and-so and so-and-so. What are they saying on their LinkedIn? What are they saying? And, you know, to maybe the the local community. When I say, technology community, I get all that information and I can decipher where I'm going, probably if they're going to be a good target for us now or maybe later. And maybe through my partners, because that's the other thing, we work with partners, as most companies do. And if you have a good partner community, they can guide you in some of that knowledge too. And that's just part of the reasons why I do all the research, because that's helps me to understand what I'm going to go into before I go into the first meeting.
And what motivates you? Because it sounds like you're putting a lot of hours in.
I like to win. And I mean, not just from the paycheck. Yes, it is about the paycheck. I think my motivation is just to win. I was given a challenge with my boss now on a particular account. I like that challenge, by the way, but it's motivating me to understand, how I can get there. Otherwise, if it's just for the paycheck, I just like to win and also do the best I can, whatever I'm doing. I'm a little bit, someone used the term weathered. I'm a little bit weathered. I like that.
I think that is a compliment.
It is a compliment. I like it. But at the same time, I've been doing this a while. And so my goals in my life now are different than my goals in life before. And so I just like to have fun at what I'm doing, do the things that I'm doing, be engaged with people and just solve things. If I win, that makes me happy, and I solved the problem when I did that, by the way, continuing that relationship, because I'll say I like to not just go in there and walk away. It's all those things that got you there that you continue. And by the way, people move on, different companies. I've moved on, executives move on. Those relationships never stop. So you continue that.
And when you lose, what have you learned?
I think you've learned back again to that story that happened in Florida. Why? Why did you lose? And then when you find out those things that you wouldn't make, why you lost, if it was back to some of the things that we couldn't solve, you learn from that. Okay, so what can we do to now next time if we go into that, learn from that, either internally when I say that. If I didn't do something, what could we have done differently? Or maybe the way we demoed something or showed something or, whatever it may be, learn from those mistakes, but not to repeat them either. Because again, I don't think everything's a perfect world when you're going to go in there and solve, you're going to go in that meeting. You go in there, you get the meeting, you go in there and they say, yeah, this makes sense. You go in there and you do a proof of value, proof of concept. You go in there and you do demonstrate. They had the budget. They're all ready to go with you. And they say, I don't think we're going to do it right now. Why? And you learn from that.
Is that what you lose or not close on most of the time, especially in technology space? It's usually a priority. They can afford it. You can tell that before you call them.
Yes. First of all, it is qualifying them. That's first and foremost, because if you're going down a road and you're going to involve their resources, but really our resources, and they don't have a budget for this, why would you do it? I mean, if they're going to find budget, that's one thing, but I think that's a very first thing you want to do is establish that we have a connection, that we can solve a problem. And if we solve that problem, is there a budget to move forward in this process? If not, when will there be? Obviously, because they'll see the value right away through what we've talked about. And they'll say, okay, this makes sense. Yes, we'll find budget or not, but you also need to make sure your resources are used in the right way. Because my people in my company, when I say that, and I'm sure the company, when I say I'm working with, they're all very important. And we just don't want to do proof of concepts just to do, hey, that looks great.
Busy. Yeah.
It doesn't solve things.
And would you characterize your ability to read a deal?
Yeah, you read the deal by what they say. And then obviously the questions you bring out from what you're asking them. Again, you don't want to say, well, is there budget, and how you ask those questions, you got to make sure you're right from the beginning. That's not what you do it. But I think you have to understand and validate the problem you're solving. And as you go through it, this would solve this from what you said before. Then the return on this could bring this, because you're trying to, the great resignation, we talk about people, talent, all the things that we're talking about. We solve that problem. We bring all the things that we know we can help them with. Now they see that. It's like, okay, well, they've validated we can solve it. Now, is this something that if once we could prove the value internally, is there a budget for this? Do you think that we can move forward with? And if they say not at this time, well, when would there be? I think those are honest questions. I think everybody would appreciate that. Nobody just wants to do busy work.
Right. Yes. Especially when you're on commission.
Well, I'm on commission, but I think that too, if you're going to take a SOC team or like the security team, and take their resources to work with you just to validate that, yeah, this looked good, and then not move forward. Why would you do that? I don't think they would.
Great. Hey, Frank, I appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Well, I would love for you to connect me on LinkedIn. I'm actually that I connect with people all the time. It makes sense. And that would be the best place.